Form B, we, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Lies can be extremely dangerous, not only for those who tell them, but also for those who are deceived by them. In our social fabric, lies can trigger serious consequences, such as spreading false information and manipulating public opinion. The ripple effect of rumours and fake news can wreak irreparable damage on the reputations of individuals, institutions, and even entire nations. The story I am about to share with you now is a perfect example of this. What started as a mere joke spiraled into a false reality of a crime that almost led to irreversible consequences. Today, you will learn the sad story of Daniel Villegas' suffering, who spent almost 2 decades in prison, paying for a crime he did not commit. Daniel Villegas was born on April 1st, 1977, in West Texas, specifically in the city of El Paso. His father, Prisciliano, worked in a factory, while his mother, Yolanda, was a housewife. Daniel had a brother and a sister, but the family always maintained a low profile, shrouded in discretion. Even though social media is more prevalent today, and this case has dramatically impacted their lives, the family chose not to disclose personal details. What we do know is that he dropped out of school in the 8th grade and had a talent for playing musical instruments. As a teenager, he was known for boasting and fabricating wild stories to impress his friends and family, who quickly saw through his exaggerations. He would distort daily events to cultivate a bad boy image, likely influenced by the tough environment of his neighborhood. In fact, he had a few minor run-ins with the police. El Paso, his city, was well known for violence during the 80s and 90s, when the majority of crime records always involved young people. There was a large concentration of drug users and gang activity in specific areas, leading to increasing numbers of violent deaths among teenagers and young adults. On April 10, 1993, a Good Friday, 4 friends named Jesse Hernandez, Juan Medina, Armando Lazo and Robert England, the latter better known as Bobby, aged between 15 and 18, attended a party at a friend's house. Jesse's cousin was supposed to give them a ride home. However, midway through the night, the cousin left with other boys, promising to return soon, but he never did. And so, the stage was set for a tragedy rooted in a lie that would haunt Daniel Villegas for decades. In the early hours of the morning, the party ended and the boys had to leave. With no public transport available, no money for taxis, and no one else to give them a ride, they decided to walk to Armando's house, which was the closest. From there, they planned to use his mother's car to take the others home. As they walked, a car with tinted windows passed slowly as if it was following the boys. But then it accelerated and left the scene. When they thought they were safe, another car stopped next to them. One of the vehicle's occupants shouted something in Spanish and started shooting at everyone. They immediately ran away. Jesse managed to get away the fastest, with Juan right behind him. When they stopped, they realized Armando and Bobby were missing. After waiting a few minutes for them to catch up and still in shock, they retraced there, and on one of the streets, they came across police cars and Armando lying in the doorway of one of the houses. Armando had been hit and managed to call for help at the home of the couple Nancy and George Gorham, but it was too late. The same fate befell Bobby. Both died at the scene. The following day, the crime was reported in all the media. Newspapers, radio and TV stations covered the events extensively. The case gained significant attention, and a famous investigator named Alfonso Marquez joined the investigation. Despite the attack, it was found that none of the 4 boys had a criminal record or involvement with dangerous groups. Days after the crime, 17-year-old David Rangel, Daniel's cousin, called him to arrange a meeting for the weekend. During the conversation, Daniel claimed he had killed the 2 boys reported in the news. He said he was with the others in a white car and fired a shotgun at the group. On April 21, 1993, the police arrived at the Villegas family home with an arrest warrant for Daniel. His mother advised him to remain silent until a lawyer arrived. At the police station, Daniel was unable to remain silent under pressure, and after several hours of being interrogated, he signed his confession where he admitted to taking the lives of the 2 boys, and with that, he was formally accused of double homicide. In his confession, he stated he was in a white car with 4 other men, mentioning 2 names, Popeye and Droopy. He claimed he was in the passenger seat, put the shotgun out of the window, and shot at the group. After confessing, Daniel was sent to an interview with a social worker. During this meeting, he told her that he was innocent. Once in prison, he received a visit from his family. He told his mother that he had confessed only because he had been coerced by the inspector. After hours of relentless pressure, he just said what the inspector wanted to hear so the interrogation would finally end. Daniel's parents, who were unable to pay for a private lawyer, had to borrow money from people close to them to pay for their son's defense, as they imagined that the state would not fulfill its role properly. But no one imagined that, unfortunately, this was only the beginning of their nightmare. In December 1994, Daniel's trial began. He was accused of the murders of Armando and Bobby and the attack on Jesse and Juan. 18 defense witnesses testified, including people who insisted it was impossible for him to be guilty because he was with them at the time of the crime. However, the court had a signed confession. Despite the conflicting alibis, information, and confession documents, the first series of hearings concluded with Daniel being granted the right to await trial in freedom. On August 24, 1995, the second trial was held. By this time, Daniel was assisted by a public defender, as his family could no longer afford a private lawyer. The public defender called only 1 witness. Ultimately, he was found guilty and sentenced to 2 life sentences for aggravated double murder. He was taken straight to the penitentiary after the trial, without even a chance to speak to his family. His family never believed he was a murderer. They wanted to prove his innocence, but with limited financial resources, this seemed impossible. Over the years, lawyers filed requests for sentence reviews, appeals, and motions, but all attempts were unsuccessful. Then, an almost divine intervention occurred. An unknown man made a difference in the lives of Daniel's entire family. Daniel's brother was married to a woman named Lucy. They had 3 daughters together. However, in 2005, after the marriage came to an amicable and peaceful end, Lucy, now his ex-sister-in-law, met another man, a contractor called John Mimbella, who she married. Despite the divorce, and because Lucy has 3 children with Daniel's brother, she never left the Villegas family. John was shocked when he learned about Daniel's story. Although he had only heard about the case years earlier, seeing the family's ongoing sadness made him feel that something was wrong. Even before meeting Daniel in person, John started researching the case. He read archived newspapers and magazines and examined the case documents. He concluded that there was no concrete proof that Daniel had committed the crimes. 2 particular findings among the vast information he unearthed were especially unsettling to him. Despite his confession claiming he used a shotgun, the shells found at the scene were from a .22 caliber gun. Moreover, Daniel confessed to shooting Armando in the back, yet the autopsy revealed that Armando was shot while facing his assailant. From then on, John was determined to help that family. But he ran into an issue. He knew absolutely nothing about criminal law. However, he was a determined man, and he had the financial means that the Villegas family lacked. On his first visit to Daniel in prison, John heard in detail how the confession was coerced. He described being handcuffed to a chair, hit on the back of the head, and psychologically tortured. Inspector Alfonso allegedly threatened Daniel, saying if he didn't sign the confession, he would be sent to a dangerous prison where he would be easily abused. The inspector also threatened to seek the death penalty by electric chair and insisted he would personally pull the lever. This would have been very scary for Daniel, who, remembering, was only 16 at the time and was alone with the inspector in the room. That's why he agreed to sign the confession paper, hoping the truth would eventually come out. John was determined to help Daniel. He sought out a private investigator, and together they discovered that on the day of the crime, the other two young people who he mentioned were accomplices in the crime, Popeye and Droopy, had no way of having participated in the act because that night Popeye was in prison and Droopy was under house arrest, confirmed by his probation officer and an electronic tracking device. But the worst was yet to come. John and this investigator went to the home of one of the survivors of the crime, Jesse, who was initially terrified about having to relive the entire trauma, but finally agreed to talk to them. Jesse was happy that the state had put the person responsible for the attack behind bars, but when John gave him a copy of the confession document, he was shocked to read the facts that in the first few lines did not match anything that happened that night. The confession claimed the car came from the opposite direction and described a small white car, while Jesse remembered a large, dark car. According to some details of the confession, Daniel would have said that he fired around 4 shots, paused and shot again, but Jesse claims that there were 6 sequential shots. After noticing all these discrepancies, Jesse told John that during his testimony, Inspector Alfonso himself had insinuated that he, Jesse, was the gunman on the night of the crime, saying that he had killed his own friends because he was interested in the girlfriend of one of them. Alfonso allegedly used various methods of coercion, including threatening him with the possibility of the death penalty by electric chair. But Jesse's mother intervened, claiming she would sue the inspector and the Texas State Police for coercion, and Jesse was released, never treated as a suspect again. At the end of their conversation, John secured Jesse's support to officially testify and share his version of the events. He didn't need to declare Daniel's innocence outright. He simply had to present his account of the day of the attack. This would allow the police and the courts to verify that his story aligned with the evidence from the investigation and did not match Daniel's coerced confession. And remember Daniel's cousin, David Rangel. He also revealed that during his interrogation, Inspector Alfonso had coerced him. The inspector had discarded David's original statement and forced him to rewrite it according to what he wanted to hear. If he refused, he would be named as the perpetrator of the crime. Despite the pressure, he didn't alter his testimony and stood by the story Daniel had told. John enlisted the services of a renowned lawyer named Joseph Spencer, better known as Joe, to file a request for a new hearing seeking a writ of habeas corpus, and if everything went well, the right to a new trial. In 2010, lawyer Joseph Spencer filed a request to review the case, and after Judge Sam Medrano read the documents, he saw no other option than to request a new public hearing. John wanted to get people's attention. He spent more than $80,000 on the case, hiring lawyers, putting up billboards around the city, and having his truck stickered with information about the case. Part of the public protested in front of the courthouse, demanding Daniel's release. TV channels began covering the case, showing these protests. During one such report, a woman named Amanda Mata saw an old friend in the crowd, Michelle Villegas, Daniel's sister. Amanda called Michelle, who shared the entire story with her. In an effort to help, Amanda sent a letter of support to Daniel in prison. He replied, sharing a bit about himself, and they began exchanging letters and occasionally talking over the prison phone. Amanda eventually decided to visit him in person. These visits became routine, and unexpectedly, the two began a relationship. On April 25, 2011, the first hearing regarding the habeas corpus request took place. Police officers who were there on the night of the crime, experts in criminal cases, people who were with Daniel on the day of the crime, Jesse and Juan, the surviving victims, and Inspector Alfonso Marquez, were interviewed. Alfonso denied coercing Daniel into signing the confession and denied any assault. Lawyer Joseph Spencer brought Rudy Flores to the hearing, a key player in the analysis of this process. He was serving a sentence for drug trafficking and was ordered to appear in court with the judge's permission. Rudy was the brother of a boy named Javier Flores, a member of a gang called Los Midnight Locos, a mix of English and Spanish for what can be translated as the Midnight Fools. At the time, this group committed crimes in locations close to the crime scene in question. According to information that Joseph had gathered before the hearings, about 2 weeks before the crime, Rudy, aged 15 at the time, was at the same party as Armando. The two got into a fight, and Rudy threatened Armando with death. Javier, his older brother, who was 20 at the time, had a dark car, and everything indicated that he was the one who shot the boys. And Rudy was in court because Javier could not be present, as he had died a few years earlier in a car accident. Despite being summoned to court, Rudy refused to answer the defense's questions, invoking his right to remain silent. His aggressive behavior led the judge to declare him in contempt of court, and he was removed. This worked in the defense's favor, as the jury interpreted his silence as an attempt to avoid responsibility or involvement in the crime. Joseph then called another former gang member to testify. This witness revealed that days after the crime, at a party, he heard Rudy and Javier bragging about the murders and showing off a .22 caliber gun, and the gun he mentioned was compatible with the bullet casings found at the crime scene. Daniel was the last to testify, recounting again how Inspector Alfonso coerced him into signing the confession. In August 2012, Judge Sam Medrano read his decision. While he did not grant Daniel the right to habeas corpus, he did grant a new trial and set bail for him to await the trial in freedom. Essentially, even with the right to a new trial, Daniel would remain in prison. What happened here may seem strange, but what happened was the following. When his lawyer Joseph Spencer made the request to the court, the request was of the right to habeas corpus if the new facts that were brought up presented the possibility of the defendant being innocent, and if that were the case, new trial hearings should be held now with focus on innocence. The judge could deny habeas corpus and that's it, but in the end, Daniel had the option. Even if habeas corpus is denied, he has the right to a new trial. Only a year and a half later, on January 14th, 2014, friends and family managed to raise the amount necessary to pay Daniel's bail. He was now temporarily free for the first time in almost 20 years. Over the following years, Judge Sam Medrano issued a document annulling the confession, acknowledging Daniel had signed it under duress. This was the first significant victory towards his ultimate freedom. Shortly before the trial date, the prosecutor offered Daniel a deal: plead guilty, remain on probation, and avoid prison. But there was a catch. He would forever have a homicide record. This was a heavy burden, even if he remained free. It was a very difficult decision for him and his family, because he was afraid that in the new trial, he would be found guilty again and remain in prison. So, despite his fear, he did not accept the agreement and underwent the court process for the third time. On October 5th, 2018, the final trial began with intense coverage from all the national media. Daniel sat in the dock again, but now without the weight of that confession document, and this time, everything happened very quickly. Just 5 days later, on October 10th, the jury handed down its decision. After 25 years of the crime, the new jurors find Daniel Villegas innocent of all charges. His reaction upon hearing the verdict was one of the most moving scenes ever recorded in a US courtroom.
Verdict Form B. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Villegas not guilty of...
Out of prison, Daniel started a new chapter. He began working for John at his construction company, married Amanda, and together they had 3 children. Unfortunately, in 2024, Daniel made headlines once again when he was arrested and charged with assault, causing bodily injury to a family member. No newspaper reported who the victim was. However, people believe it was his wife, as it is known that when officers arrived at the scene, the woman told them she and Daniel had been arguing after he accused her of being unfaithful. She added that Daniel grabbed her by the wrists with both hands, causing her pain. Details about the trial, which took place 5 months later in December 2024, remain unclear. It is only known that after just 45 minutes of jury deliberation, Daniel was found not guilty. Reflecting on Daniel's teenage years, several factors must be considered. He dropped out of school, was influenced by dangerous groups, and his rigid personality was likely a survival mechanism in a tough environment. This case starkly illustrates the peril that a lie can pose. As I mentioned earlier in this episode, lies can be extraordinarily dangerous for both the deceivers and the deceived. They create false realities with nearly irreversible consequences. If his ex-sister-in-law hadn't separated from his brother and met John, the angel in Daniel's life, he might still be serving a life sentence for a crime he did not commit. If you've made it this far, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to this channel. Also, add your opinion in our comments. Thank you very much. I will see you in the next case.